See it up on the top. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads with my partner and co-host, Sean Francis. I am Brian Altunian. You know, when we have a family member who struggles, sometimes we see that struggle is not just, just part of our child's or our grandchild's or our family members' life. It's a struggle that we see common in a big group of folks, right? And so we can either say, well, let me just focus on my own child, or let me take that child's experience and do something positive and have an impact, because maybe it's going to make somebody else's life better. Today's guest, Jacqueline Nixon, did exactly that. She's a warrior mother and an author. We're very excited to be talking to her today. So stay tuned for another great episode of Just Two Dads. Awesome. Welcome back, everybody. This is, I believe it's episode number 110. You think that I know the numbers. I don't know. We're about, I think, episode 109 or 110. I am Brian Altunian. I'm here along with Sean Francis, my business partner, my colleague, my friend, my family. We've been doing this podcast for over 2 years, and we decided we wanted to create a platform where we could shine the spotlight on amazing people who are serving and servicing the special needs community, doing something magical, special. We consider them all to be warriors, as just two dads of children who belong to that special needs community. We like to focus on those people who are doing amazing things. So before we get into today's guest and topic, which is going to be awesome, ton of energy. I'm not sure I'm going to get a word in edgewise, so I got to fill up this intro as much as I possibly can, because I think it's going to be an awesome conversation. So first, I want to thank everybody who's catching us live on Facebook. We've had a little bit of technical glitches because, as you know, so stuff is happening in the world of social media, and we never know what's gonna happen. So for those of you catching us live on our Facebook page, welcome. Please leave a comment. Share with your friends. If you're catching us after the fact on our YouTube channel at Just Two Dads, again, please like, subscribe, share with your friends. If there's people that would be impacted by the stories that we're going to share today, share, right? The best thing we can do is communicate. For everybody listening on our podcast outlets all over, hello. We hope that you will come back to us. Send us an email at wearejusttwodads, all one word, wearejusttwodads@gmail.com. We try to answer all of them. Sean and I race to see who gets to respond to emails faster. Sean usually wins. And if you're hearing us down in the U.S. Virgin Islands at WSTX AM radio, again, welcome. Before we get into today's topic, I just want to say one thing. It's a first week of November in 2022, and we had guests on a couple of weeks ago who are putting on a fundraiser this Saturday, November 5th. Go to ibdstrong.org. Again, ibdstrong.org. There's still, if you're in the Southern California area, there are tickets available if you want to attend. There's a place where you can donate. It's for folks who are dealing with inflammatory bowel disease and the long-term conditions that represents. And so we're always trying to improve the research, and so that try to find, there's no cure for colitis or Crohn's. It's a condition that can be managed, but it has to be managed on a lifelong basis. So we're trying to do our best to support those folks. So if you can do that, go to ibdstrong.org. I want to thank you for your contribution there. Sean and I are actually going to be speaking briefly on stage in that event too, so that'll be kind of fun for us. And then next week we have a guest. We're bringing back a guest from the past, Billy Price. I always mess that up. Billy Price. Sorry, Billy, if you're watching. Of Billy's shoes. His is a fascinating story. We interviewed him almost exactly a year ago, and we're going to be doing a year, kind of a recap. Things have changed in his life that are amazing, and he's also going to be one of our first sponsors of our podcast. So I hope that you support Billy's footwear, and we'll be putting that stuff up for next week. So just want a little setup for what's coming. And again, thank you all for joining us and participating with us. I know Jackie's dying to be, to get rolling, because I think she's jumped on here early. So without further ado, I'll shut up, and I'm going to throw it over to my partner, Mr. Sean Francis, who I love dearly. We give each other life lessons and life community. We're talking several times a day, and it's soul filling for me. And I love being in this project together with him. And so I'm going to throw it over to you, Sean. Sean, how are you doing today, my friend?
I am doing great and I'm blessed. And I don't want to cut into our time with our amazing guest, Jackie, but I wasn't going to touch on this too, but I think it's worthwhile. Those of you that watch us know that we go live on Facebook and then the episodes are available on WSTXM radio later in the day and uploaded to both our YouTube channel and wherever you get podcasts on virtually every platform within 24 to 48 hours. Well, I made a post the other day just thinking, it was just as we're talking about the need for love and awareness and looking out for each other. I made a post the day that Elon Musk took over Twitter, and there were some posts that had racial and anti-Semitic remarks. And I reposted those images along with a video. I blurred some of the words out, but I stated that we need to know that hate is real. And as a result of that, we got to make sure that love is real also. Twitter has no restrictions on anybody saying those words. I, as a result, was presented with a very good problem in that Facebook put a restriction on my account for 29 days where I can't go live. My name is attached to the Just Two Dads page. So that page, in addition to my personal Facebook page, does not allow for any live broadcast for 29 days. Facebook is taking a look at it because I let them know I don't necessarily, agree with it, but it's a good problem to have. And so keeping with the idea of love being important, our guest today is someone who is the epitome of that. She is a warrior. She's a mother. She's a wife. She's a special needs advocate by way of her grandson's diagnosis with ADHD. And I am speaking of none other than Mrs. Jacqueline Nixon. Jacqueline, welcome.
Hi. Thank y'all for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Great to see you.
It's great to see you. Great to have you here. It's always great to have a fellow Virgin Islander as a guest here as well. And so that means a whole lot. I know that, your story consists of you spending years serving our country in the Air Force, then working in the oil and gas industry, and then at a later stage in life becoming an author of children's books based on your grandson's diagnosis. But everything that we do now is impacted by what came beforehand. You may see yourself as not being a hero, but we think that you are, and all heroes have superpowers, and all heroes' powers come from their origin. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you were raised. I already know where you're from, but those things impact what the things that you face later on in life. So why don't we start there?
Well, I was actually born on the beautiful island of St. Kitts and relocated to St. Thomas when I was an infant. So I claim St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands. That's where I was educated, mighty
Rock
chicken
City.
hawks. And, I was talking to my mom before I came on here, and she's so funny. But she is the one who's just always been the person who pushed us. She had us reading lots of books. And I remember reading books where there was never any characters that looked like me or anyone that I knew. I read every Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys books and loved them, would read them over and over again. But P.P. Longstocking, none of them looked like anyone that I knew. And being an author was like something miraculous. It was something that was untouchable. But my mom had us reading books all the time. So today when I was talking to her about my book, she's like, well, you could have done this a little better. And but that's what I love about her is she has never coddled us or told us, give us the participation trophy. She would give it to you straight. And
she loves you real.
Yes. There was no gray areas when she was raising us. And I think that's what helped me to stand up for things and speak out. And when I see there's a need to share things that's going on, I don't shy away from it at all. Right.
So you mentioned earlier, for those that are not from the Virgin Islands or don't know, you said "Go Mighty Chicken Hawks." Those that don't know, that's Charlotte Amalia High School. Charlotte Amalia is the capital of the U.S. Virgin Islands. I attended there one year. My dad is an alumni as well. An alumnus, I should say. But let's go back, to the space between coming to St. Thomas from St. Kitts to eventually getting to high school, and tell us about that.
So, back when I was a little girl, you had where you went to Head Start, which is not readily available anymore. My family we grew up in a very religious household where we were in church every day was open. My parents were very strict, but my mom was always an educator. She went to school my entire childhood. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Because coming from St. Kitts, even though she graduated their high school, she had to start over in the 9th grade when she came to the U.S. Virgin Islands. And so my entire childhood, I watched my mom going to school from high school. She graduated valedictorian, didn't know what it meant when she did it.
Wow.
She was 9 years old when she graduated. Well, she was pregnant with my sister that's 9 years younger than I, which I'm the second of 5. I have an older sister, me, my brother, then that 9-year-old that walked across the stage with my mom, and then a younger sister. And
wow.
My parents were married until I was 14. West Indian parents a lot don't really show a lot of affection. They tell you what their expectations are of you. Don't embarrass the family. And I was curious about a lot of things, but I felt like the way how I was raised, I kind of did not ask a lot of questions. You kind of stayed within the box and moved along. And some of the things that I see my grandson is doing, I look back and that was me. Like I would sit in class, and while the teacher was teaching, I always had a book reading because I love to read. And I would read my book while the teacher was teaching and ask questions. I didn't like to do homework, and I would pass my tests. But the only class I passed with straight A's was English because that was my favorite subject. And all the other ones, I knew if I made a C, my mom was not going to beat me. So I would make a C in the other classes and straight A's in English because I was one of the weird ones that enjoyed Beowulf and all the, I love the reading and, everything about that. So I read a lot and just was hoping to hurry up and grow up to be free to do what I wanted to do because my mother kept her foot on our backs. And
I was going to say, a part of that, especially for those that are not familiar with Caribbean. Now, is St. Kitts still, is it British or is it independent?
It's an independent country now.
Okay, so being an independent country, what people do, this is something I took for granted growing up in the U.S. Virgin Islands. You forget that it's still U.S. So whether it's the mainland or the Caribbean, you have people that come from other islands that are either British or independent, where opportunities may be limited, and you flock to the U.S. Virgin Islands, where you have English spoken as well, but more opportunity there, and you have an influx of people that come from other places. So your parents, not sure what they did in St. Kitts, but whatever they did, they were just about let's get done what's in front of us. I'm sure because those are ambitious people, and you take that for granted. Even though it's a shorter distance.
The interesting thing about that is my parents got married when my mom was 16 years old. I think my dad was 21, and they moved to St. Thomas. My dad moved first, and then he brought us over, my mother, my older sister, and myself. Well, by the time my mom was 19 years old, they had already owned their first home in St. Kitts. And my dad would send her money from his job at Lockhart Lumber Yard. And when she finished building that house with the money he sent, when she came to St. Thomas, they didn't owe a penny on that house. And she did that as a teenager.
And that's another thing that's Caribbean is like usually, the American dream is to buy a house. The Caribbean dream has been a little bit more to build a house.
Yes. Well, we don't have the big inventory that they have up here either. You want a house, you pretty much have to build it. And my dad would work 2 jobs to take care of our family. I grew up in Estate Thomas until junior high, and in the 8th grade we moved to Old Tutu.
Okay, wait, where in Estate Thomas exactly?
4th Street.
4th Street, like Sugar Estate.
Yeah, Sugar Estate, 4th Street.
Okay, That's down the hill. The house that my parents built was above on top on up on Rappoon Hill.
I'm just
Oh,
gonna
okay.
sit over here in the corner and let you guys have that. I'm just gonna. Just go ahead. Keep going. This is awesome.
You know, it's funny,
It's awesome.
Brian, because when I was in the Air Force, when I went to the Air Force, it was so hard trying to talk to people because a lot of people from St. Thomas, the Caribbean, they went into the Army. And when I went into the Air Force, I met one other person, and that's when I made it to Germany. And I would be trying to have these conversations, and I was you with everybody talking about the rappers and what's happening in LA and New York. And I would just sit there and be quiet because I contributed nothing to the conversation. And then whenever I opened my mouth, they didn't care what I said. Oh, say that again? Because of my accent.
Two things. We care what Brian has to say, and two, in terms of contribution, why don't we go ahead and talk about that? Because you're in high school, you're at Charlotte Maya. Did you go right from there into the Air Force?
So, funny story about how I ended up in the Air Force. One day I was having a test in probably math because I hated math, and I didn't want to go to the class. And I saw some people standing outside the auditorium. I said, "Why are they standing outside the auditorium?" Somebody said, "Oh, you got to go. They're taking a test to go for the military, the ASVAB test." And I was like, "If I go take that test, that means I get a pass for not going to class today?" They're like, "Yeah." I went and I got in that line and went in and took this test and didn't really think anything about it. And I decided all my friends were going to college. I went and got a college application and started filling it out, and it said, "What math did you take after trigonometry?" And I was like, "Trigonometry?" So I turned to my friend. I said, "Have you ever heard of trigonometry? Is that such a thing?" And she said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh." I balled that application up and threw in the trash and canceled any thoughts of going to college. And my mom used to always say, "College or the military, but you're not staying in my house." And no, I'm the only person ever in my family to go in the military, by the way. So after I graduated from high school, I went down Main Street trying to get a job. Nobody wanted to hire me because they're like, "Well, you don't have any experience." I was like, "Did you miss that part where I told you I just graduated on Sunday?"
And Main Street, the businesses on Main Street are primarily
jewelry stores,
retail stores, jewelry, cigarettes, cologne, and stuff like that. So it's not like you couldn't do that. That's crazy.
I thought with my winning personality, sure, they're gonna hire me to sell jewelry and whatever. But I'm glad that they said no. And so I took on my first job at Pueblo and
supermarket.
But still, my mom was like, "College or the military? You can't stay here." So I went down to the Army recruiter's office. So now I had some friends from JROTC that were already in the Army because they graduated about 2 years or the year previously. And it was like, "Do not become a police officer." So I was like, "Don't worry about that because I'm not cooking professionally for anybody." So I went to the recruiter's office and he looks at me. He goes, "Well, your scores are so low that the only jobs I have for you is a milk or a cook." So I was like, "What?" I was like, "Well,
oh no, we've had
technology for you.
We've had technology issues all morning, everybody. This is why we go live, because this is real life right here.
Unfortunately, she's going to be panicking when she realizes she's no longer on.
She dropped out. She's going to, she'll be freaked out a little bit.
Yeah,
that's right. She'll be back.
It's okay. You'll be back.
Hey, everybody. So if you're just catching us there, she's coming back. We got her. She's coming back. She's going to be freaking out a little bit, I think. But let's see.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's all good. This is real life, everybody. We're trying to get her loaded up here. We're gonna be talking about her.
Interesting
about her
day.
book.
Tech.
Hey,
really is. Hey, there she is.
I was like, is that my Wi-Fi that's doing that?
And that one may have been yours.
I think so. It might be. Yeah, it's okay.
So anyway, when he told me that, I was like, well, I'm not doing any of those. And I told him off a little bit because I had a little hot mouth, still do. And I went home. I didn't know anything about any Air Force. And it was funny because my ex-boyfriend went into the Air Force and it didn't even click because everybody went in the Army. So the Air Force called my house that same night that I got home, like feeling dejected and rejected from the Army. And he said, hi, you scored so high that you're eligible to go in the Air Force. I was like, I was just in y'all office today and you told me I scored too low and I'm not going to be nobody's cook or MP. And I'm all attitude to him. And he was like, what? You were in our office today? Yes. And he's confused because he's really come from Puerto Rico. So he said, I was 17 at the time. He said, is your parents home? I said, yeah, but they're not going to make me go in any Army either. And I give my mom the phone. So she started talking to her. She's like, Jackie, this is the Air Force. I'm like, the Air Force? And
that's so wild.
Yeah. And I got on the phone. And if anybody knows anything about the Army and the Air Force, you have to score a certain number to go in the Air Force. And if you're not high enough, you don't qualify for the Air Force. But again, the Army guy saved me by telling me no that day because I am not one to get up early in the morning running anywhere. Okay. So I went to Puerto Rico, did the whole MEPS thing, and they said I had to wait for a year to go in. So like I swore in and everything. And actually myself and 3 other people from class of 86, big up yourself. We were the first 4 to swear in on St. Thomas Virgin Islands, so made history there. And I was home for almost a year. My mother was getting on my nerves. Mommy, if you're watching, you are getting on my nerves, and I was getting on her nerves too. By the time we had enough of each other, I called the Air Force. I said, I don't care if you don't have a job for me. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get off of this little island. And I actually went into the Air Force without a job. So while I was in basic training, running every day, me and my mom made back up. I called my mom. She's like, how you doing? I said, Mommy, they making me run every day. She's like, well, what time? I told her what time. She said, okay, I'm going to pray for you. I said, okay. When I would be running, I'd be like, Mommy, pray for me. Because look, I don't want to run unless there's a fire, a dog chasing me. Okay. And we had to get up early in the morning and run for no good reason every day. But the good thing with the Air Force is once you're done with basic training, then you didn't have to do it anymore. Whereas the Army, you did it every day. So thank you to the Army recruiters who lied and said I scored so low because I ended up going to the Air Force.
That's awesome.
How many years did you spend in the Air Force?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how long were you there?
I was there for 4 years, and they were some of my best years. I spent 2 years at Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany. And then I loved Germany so much that I thought, well, they don't speak English. Let me go to England for 2 years. So I spent my next 2 years at RAF Mildenhall. And then I met my first son's father there and got pregnant. And I couldn't imagine handing my baby over to a stranger after 6 weeks and going back to work. So I got out of the Air Force. But prior to that, I was thinking about becoming a paratrooper because I'm crazy like that. And I went and retested and everything to qualify to be a paratrooper. And then out of nowhere came this baby.
Wow.
So I ended up.
Thank you for your service.
4 years. Huh?
Yeah.
Thank you for your service, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, it was so much fun. When people say thank you, I'm like, well, okay. It was the best 4 years of my life. Traveling all over Germany. And, you know, when you're overseas and you're in the military, everybody's like one big family. So we hung out, we partied. Boy, did I party. I used to fall asleep at my desk because I got away from my strict mom and just had a wonderful time traveling all over the country. So all over the world. I saw Turkey, Italy. So here's this little girl from a 32 square mile island, where when the military sent me to Texas, I had never rode an escalator. I didn't do the moving sidewalks. And you remember our airport used to be a hangar. You come in one door, you go out the next.
It was a World War II hangar that you just pretty much like went through it. I kind of missed that, but yeah.
Yes. Okay. So when they dropped me off in my connecting flight from St. Thomas, I saw my gate number. Let's say it was 250. So I said, okay, 250. So I went all over the airport, eating everything, riding the sidewalks, checking out the escalators. And I went back to that gate, which we all know that very rarely happens. You get off one gate, you have to go to another gate. So I show up at the gate where they dropped me off at. And because I thought they had one door, just like we did. And the lady, and I said, I'm here ready to get on the plane. And she looked at me. She looked at my ticket. She goes, that's a 20-minute walk. And you have 10 minutes to get there. And I was like, oh my God. But luckily, because I was going to the military, they did something and I was able to make the plane, even though I didn't feel very lucky when I showed up in San Antonio and they started yelling at me. I was like, lady, you should have saved me and that helped me get to this gate. So,
oh boy.
Yeah.
So tell us then about, so your first son is then born. I want to continue on the path towards the book. How did you then meet your husband, and tell us about that and the other kids and leading towards your grandson's diagnosis?
So my first son, Joshua Page, he changed my life. I remember when I looked at him and I started crying. That's when I realized what love was. My God. I mean, even like right now, I'm so mad at him and all I feel is the love for him. And I was 23 years when I had him, 23-year-old mom. And when I went home, my mother acted like I was doing everything wrong. You know how they like to, no, don't do that. Don't hold him. Don't call his name at night because the Jumbi gonna hear all these rules with this little baby. And I would wake up, my mom already had the baby done, bathed him, fed him, took him for a walk. And I felt so overwhelmed with being responsible for this little beautiful life. And I got married to his dad 30 days later. His dad was supposed to be there for the birth, but he was in the military. And Josh came a little early.
And just to clarify, she said Jumbi. Jumbis are spirits, evil spirits. Go ahead. Sorry.
So Josh came a little early. So we tried to estimate the due date, and my ex-husband had a flight, but Josh came early. So when he came, we had planned a wedding and everything, and to fly off the island because my mother did not want me. It was her first grandchild. So being that I was in the military, I could have had the baby on any military installation. But we didn't have one in St. Thomas. But my mom was like, this is my first grandchild. And when you're pregnant, you're not at your best. So it's best for you to stay at home. And she made me gain a whole lot of weight, cooking and feeding me way too much food. And I was all for it because I was away from home for like 4 years and I'm getting all this Caribbean food. Like we used to plan a whole meal out from breakfast all the way to dinner and then repeat the next day. So when I had Josh, after 30 days, I was ready to get away from my mom and all her friends. I was trying to breastfeed. My mother's friends would come over and she just fling the door open to see her grandchild. I'm like, hello, feeding baby here. These are my boobs, not yours, mom. I mean, like no respect. So I was happy to leave. And I went to Wichita Falls. Wichita Falls, Kansas. Am I saying that right? Wichita, Kansas. Wichita, Kansas, which hated it. And when he turned a year old, I said, you made it. And I cried. because I was like, I did it. He survived his first year with me and his dad.
So and it's so he was neurotypical, no health issues or anything like that, but you're just, as a new mom, just unsure of yourself and
Right.
trying to make sure that you're doing the right thing.
Well, I had an emergency C-section with him because the cord was wrapped around his neck. And actually, when they took him out, he was not, they had to resuscitate him. They said he had injuries that were equivalent to being in a car wreck. And that was very devastating, because when you're going through these parenting things, they talk to you and it just all sounds so nice. You're going to be pregnant, then the baby's going to come out and voila. And when I went to the hospital and they told me that, okay, well, we have to have an emergency C-section. This was really crazy, because while they're rolling me in, I said, Lord, please let me die and let my baby live, if one of us had to die. And at that same moment I'm saying that prayer, my mom said, because she's a Caribbean woman, she don't hold that. She go, well, if anybody's gonna die, y'all let that baby die, because my daughter could have another baby. That's what my mom said. Wow. I was so mad at her, but then I had to laugh because she was praying for her baby and I was praying for my baby.
Now, I'm going to fast forward just a little. Okay. So, but let me ask you this. So Josh is neurotypical and everything, but there's challenges when he's born. When we fast forward to you becoming a grandparent and your grandson is diagnosed with ADHD, did your experience as a mother and the challenges that he had initially at birth play a role in how you responded to that diagnosis?
So the funny thing is, when Josh hit 3rd grade, my son, a teacher said he has ADHD. And I said, no, he doesn't. And I got really mad and went and complained to the principal and everything about her telling me that my child had ADHD. Because at that time you saw kids who were jumping around, acting crazy. And I'm like, he sits through an entire movie. He, we go out to dinner, he sits still, he eats the dinner. What are you saying? And at that time I didn't believe in ADHD, didn't understand what it was. And I definitely was not giving my child any medication. Like, they chastised that teacher and told her, you have no right to diagnose people's kids. And I was right there like, yes, you tell her. Well, moving forward, I saw him constantly dealing with issues in school. So when my grandson came out and we started raising him, I started seeing my son all over again.
Interesting.
And is this Josh's son then?
Yes, he's actually a junior, looks just like his father, and saw so many of the signs, which where with school and how he's dealing with things. So this time when I had heard a diagnosis, I believed it, because my son, who's 31 years old, still struggles. He gets a job, he does great, and then he starts complaining. I say he's about to leave that job because he can't. Nothing holds his attention for very long, and he is not medicated. So, because I missed that when I was a young mother, not understanding the far-reaching effects if you do not address ADHD when they're little. So even though he managed to successfully graduate high school, I felt like I did those 12 years all over again.
Got it.
Every year I was like, I got promoted to the 2nd grade, all the way to 12th grade. And so when my grandson came around, I saw it and I immediately started trying to find him help.
How old was he when he was diagnosed, your grandson?
The thing with ADHD is, it's hard to diagnose when they're little, but from the time he was in kindergarten, they were complaining. The daycare was, a matter of fact, I put him in a daycare at 3, and it was like a school, like a private school. So from 3 years old, they were complaining about him. And then when he went to kindergarten, they said he's gonna be diagnosed with ADHD. He's too young right now, but that's gonna happen. And then when he went to that was pre-K. Then when he went to kindergarten, they started trying to suspend him. And
but how old was he when he got a formal diagnosis?
5. And
5. Okay.
it was a very difficult formal diagnosis because it's very hard to find child psychiatrists. And so I basically took him to his PCP, and the teachers had to fill out a form. And based off of what they said and what I said, they said, yes, he does have ADHD. And at that time, prescribe him with medication.
Now, had you been thinking about all this time, where were you, if anywhere at all, with the notion of becoming a published author?
No. Well, let me say this. I've always wanted to be an author. My favorite author is Stephen King. So I saw myself writing horror movies. I mean, horror, stories.
That genre, right?
Yes, and tried numerous times, but I was trying to mimic Stephen King too much and could never get it. Okay.
So how do you go from an aspiring author of the horror genre to then, wait a minute, let me write about the experiences or challenges that my grandson is having in school as a result of his diagnosis of ADHD?
So we had a dog named Demi that was missing for 9 years, and they found her as she was chipped, and we got her back after 9 years. And after 30 days, we had her in our house. Within 30 days, she died. And I started writing about Demi. And I would write and cry and cry and cry. I still have that book to finish. But every time I would start writing, I would cry. I have people read it, they're crying. And I was out walking on the trail, speaking to a childhood friend I've known since first grade. And she said, you take your ass home and write that book. I was telling her about Josh. You need to go and write about your experience with him. And I came off the walking trail and sat down and wrote that book in one sitting. Of course, before edits. Okay. And I have a friend, Rico Cornelius. He's an author from the Virgin Islands as well. I shared with him my book about Demi, and he was giving me feedback about that book. And then I sent him this book, Little Stephen, Why School So Hard. And he said,
Cornelius or Cornero?
I'm sorry, Rico Cornero. Yes, sorry, Rico, I messed up your name. Yeah,
I know Rico. Yeah, and he lives in Houston as well. Yes.
So, yes. And he also used to always tell me, you have a book in you. So when I sent him this book, he said, this is pretty much ready to go. You just need to get it edited, And I started moving forward with Little Stephen because even to this day, I still have trust issues with the school, with the way how we were treated, because a lot of times they treat ADHD children as if it's a discipline issue, and they're going to discipline the ADHD out of your child. And if you don't participate and agree, you're a horrible parent.
Right.
Crazy.
So I had to, when I finished writing this book, it was just so important. Some of the things that I had to do was take my 6'5" husband to the school with me because they were trying to bully me as a mom and act like I was just a crazy, hysterical mom. And we had a meeting, and my husband is always late, like I told you guys before this started. If he's supposed to be there at 5 o'clock, he starts getting dressed for 5. So I left the house in my own car. And when I showed up to the meeting, there was one other female in the room and me, and they had all men, had nothing to do with my child. They even had the principal in this meeting. And in IEP meetings for children, the principal doesn't attend. Right. They found some other guy. So they had about 3 men at the table and another woman, because she was the art person, and myself. And they started. And then my husband showed up. And he set them straight because he's very smart. And whereas I get emotional and get high pitched with the voice, he was calm. They were using words like, your grandson assaulted another child, using words that you would not tie to a 5-year-old child. And so my husband started throwing out words like, y'all are negligent. Because when this child would start acting up, he showed signs that he was getting frustrated. He was showing signs that he was getting overstimulated. And all they had to
Right.
do was when he starts showing those signs is address it. But no, they will let him sit there. And then when he starts falling out and everything, a child gets hit. And now, oh, we're going to suspend you. Even though he wasn't deliberately going up and smacking a child, they would, at one point when they were trying to hold him down and he was kicking his legs, they suspended him because he kicked a teacher. So when my husband showed up and he started using words like negligence, oh no, you can't use that term. My husband said, well, words do matter, doesn't it? When you want to use words like assault towards a 5-year-old, words matter. And I brought that story up because I've met some single moms that have to fight this battle that we have to fight with the school for children. And it's hard when you're doing it by yourself. And I've met some families where they show up with the auntie, the uncle, the grandparents, because it's such a hard struggle to get the schools to, because I know here in Texas, we have the STAR test, and the teachers have a lot of pressure on them for these kids to pass this test. And they have a full classroom. And when you integrate these children into the classroom, it's hard trying to teach a class and you have this kid over here.
Do they
distracted?
Do they not make accommodations of any kind with regard to standardized testing in Texas that you know of when a child is on an IEP?
They do make accommodations, but one of the things is my child goes to a charter school. And my two older ones before him went to the same charter school. They did extremely well. And I felt like I already knew he was going to have problems. And I thought since I had such a great relationship with the administration there, that they would understand that it's not a parenting issue. It's not a discipline issue, that this child has ADHD. And I overshared, told them his story and everything, hoping to get support. And because the charter school, they pride themselves on having the best behaved kids, the highest standardized scores and everything.
Right.
They saw us as a problem that they wanted to get rid of. So initially they were like, if I don't support them, then they'll leave. Because like the bigger public schools do have more experience in these things and may have more programs set up. But me being ignorant in that matter put him where his aunties, aka older sisters, went.
Right.
And it's a smaller school environment, but they were not, even though they said that they accept special need kids, they were not very accommodating. So
they weren't equipped.
To teachers in other public schools. So what am I supposed to say? I had to start asking people who I knew were teachers, what do I need to say when I go to these meetings? Because we were clashing. I was a warrior mother, aka grandmother, at this school, fighting for him to be treated with respect and fairly.
So is he still at the same school now? Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
I was saying that's why we always, tell people that, talk to an IEP advocate and, have somebody there fighting for you, so you can just whisper in their ear and let them go to town. They know what they're doing, but it's tough, right? Most people don't realize that resource is available.
Yes.
So totally understand that. I'm sorry, Sean, you were going to ask your question.
Yeah, I was going to say, where is he now? Is he still at the same school?
He is still at the same school, and we just had an incident recently. So one of the things is with the ADHD child, and he has some other things going on. They like what they're used to, even if it's hell.
Let me ask you this then. We try and avoid compound questions, but I think it applies at this point, which is, you already answered the first one, which is, okay, is he there? What progress, if any, has been made between you, him, your family, and the school as it relates to his needs? So this year, I was finally able to get someone to sit in the classroom with him one-on-one to help redirect him when he's doing work. Because now he's in third grade. Third grade is a big year for all students.
Right.
And with the ADHD child, and you're trying to teach them compound multiplication questions when they don't even really know all of their multiplication facts, he just gives up. He will ball it up and throw it in the trash. So I had to get a person, and he still don't have the person every day, but they go in there several days in the week to redirect him and encourage him to get his work done. And I still feel like there's a lot of work to be done, because they will say things like, oh, well, if he does great today, we're going to give him a star. And the minute he doesn't do great, we're going to take away his lunch time, when that's a time for them to decompress and exert some energy. They take that away. So I told myself, would you reward a child with a broken leg for walking on that leg? No, you don't. Would you punish them because they couldn't walk? No, you won't. But they would punish an ADHD child for.
Let me ask you this: Do you think that? And I hope you don't mind, man. We're going to be direct. Do you think his, and you know this better than I, not only because you're his grandmother, but because you know you have better awareness as to the options that are there in your area than I do, obviously. But do you think his path is best served or can be best served remaining at the school, or do you guys need to look at an alternative? Okay.
And we are looking. So I found a psychiatrist, a new psychiatrist that I'm taking him to next Wednesday for his first time. And they're going to work with us on helping him to wrap his mind around leaving that school. So the plan is this will be his last year in that school, and we're going to find something that's more suitable.
It could be the subject of another book, right? Transitions, when your child deals with transitions, right?
Definitely.
Because that's you want to kind of journal that, because that would be fascinating to see. And I want to talk about your books. And I know that you are, now that you have, this one published and you've always had the desire to do it, you've got plans to put out a whole bunch of books. We talk about, we don't, and believe it or not, we only have a few minutes left of this hour already. Can we talk a little bit about that? Like because this book that you've written, Little Steven, these are in it's really his story, right? You wrote it, but
talk about his actual contribution to the book, not just through your eyes. Talk about that, please.
So this is the book, and
it's a paperback. Yes.
One of the things that he said to me when he first went to school, because he connects with a person, and then when they would go to PE and music, you would think he would be happy, but he was upset. And I said, why are you being so difficult? He said, well, I only have one mom. Why do I have a bunch of teachers? And then he used to miss eating his lunch, because when you go in the cafeteria, they have somebody on the loudspeaker and they're be quiet, stop talking.
Stimulation.
And then they're like, everybody have to start counting, and they put their hands up. Well, he was so busy, and then he's still trying to make friends. And he was so busy trying to keep up. He would literally come home with his lunchbox untouched. Under his eyes started getting dark. He was having such a hard time, because every day, if you threatened to not let him go to school, he would jump up. He wanted to go to school. And by the end of that day, I was picking up a crying, sad child.
So he was overstimulated too. Yeah.
Huh?
It sounds like he was overstimulated too in the lunchroom setting. So that's another sense of accommodation that's needed. So go ahead and tell us about what he expressed to you, not just generally speaking, but I know you told me before that you let him know that you're writing the book based on this experience, and he began to give input and is essentially a co-author for the book. Tell us about that.
Yes. He, in the book, it's basically me sharing the things he told me, because I can, like, I talk about how he wanted to be friends with a kid, and so he ran and chased them, and he was just trying to play, but it was not the right time. So next thing, the teachers are holding him down. Everything in this book is what he came home and told me happened in his day. The only input I had was one day I went to work and I got another phone call, and I drove. It was like, my job is like 45 minutes away. So I drove there ready to beat his butt. I'm like, I'm sick of this. I get there and I see his face. Around his lips were white. Under his eyes were dark. and he looked so sad that I burst into tears myself. And that's when I was like, this is no joke, and I have to do something. Because before I was, hey, the doctor said this. That's when I drew the line in the sand and started asking for help outside. But in this book, it's his words. It's talking about, and the other point I wanted to draw, I had a young man who was in college that have ADHD, and he read this book and he said, I love your book because when I was a kid and they told me I had ADHD, I didn't know what that meant. And he said, all of these things that your grandson experienced, it was happening to me, but he didn't know it was ADHD. He was like, I'm just a bad kid.
Right.
And so he said, this book helps kids to say that's me. And one of my classmates allowed me to read this book to their students. And you had kids saying, that's me. And the other kids who weren't, they were like, oh, they were so compassionate hearing what this child was experiencing. Because another thing, a lot of ADHD kids are rejected. Like my grandson doesn't have a lot of friends. They don't want to be friends with them because the impulsiveness that comes with ADHD makes them unpredictable. And you're the kid my mom told me not to be friends with. So when I read to that class, you heard the kids that were having compassion. And then you heard kids that identified. They're like, that's me. I feel that way. So, and because it's his words, kids are able to connect. And it's kind of like if a person had was diagnosed with something and you don't know what all comes with that, all you know is these letters. Well, in this book, the kids are able to see, oh, I'm getting anxious because I have ADHD. Oh, all these loud noises are distracting to me because I have ADHD.
It's a thin line between that and the autism spectrum. Very familiar with much of that.
Well, she got tested for autism as well.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. We're at that point.
He just didn't score high enough to be autistic, but he was also tested for that.
Wow.
Jackie, we could talk to you forever. It's fascinating. And I know we've just scratched the surface. Anybody who's been listening or watching, but I want to hear more about that. I want to hear more. But we have a limited amount of time, unfortunately, on this. So as we come to closing this, I know Sean has a question he wants to ask you, which we ask at every show. So Sean, you want to give?
I'll do that. I want to encourage everyone to go wherever you get books, including Amazon, not limited to that place, and look for the book Lil Stephen, Lil, Lil for little. Why school is hard.
Why school is so hard.
Why school is so hard, and we have the link in the on the screen for those that are actually watching. So at this point in the show, the question that we generally ask is, look, our ability to change the world is based in some way, great or small, on our ability or our willingness to change ourselves. So with that in mind, give us one example of a thought or belief that you once held dear and believed strongly that you no longer believe to be true.
I did not believe in ADHD. I remember seeing parents. I used to work at a furniture store, and all the newbies were responsible for the children's area where kids think that's their own personal play area, and they would come and jump all over the beds, and then I would have to go remake those beds. And a lady came in there with a child that was ADHD, and he had the attention deficit, and he had the hyperactive, and he was acting out. And I wanted to volunteer to beat him for her. And they sent her for him acting out like that. And of course, I was in my 20s at the time, and very naive to a lot of things of how I saw parenting. The first time I had to put a pill in my grandson's mouth, I cried, I sobbed. Matter of fact, I made my son take one. I said, tell me how it makes you feel. I was so afraid to medicate him. So I've learned that ADHD is real. Sometimes you do need to take medication to allow these kids an opportunity to be successful. And medication is not always the answer, but it's very important to do your research. Just understand that it's a real diagnosis, and whether it's changing diet, providing mental assistance so that they can learn how to cope with their distractions. That was the learning, because there were times when we would be on the phone and he would be talking to his psychologist. I'm like, when I get off this phone, I'm gonna beat his butt. And learning that parenting is ever changing, and also supporting parents who are dealing with this situation. Whenever I'm traveling, I see a mom and the kid is crying, I embrace her. We really need to look at how we treat moms with children out there. And you hear them out loud in the airport. Oh my God, we were all babies and cried and disturbed somebody's peace. Be nice.
That's exactly where we end and how we end the show. The lesson from that, which is about, empathy, which Brian will go ahead and touch on.
Yeah. Jack, first off, this is fascinating. I hope everybody gets a chance to read your book. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who pick up little Stephen and they're going to go, oh, wait a minute, maybe I had ADHD as a child, because that was my issue. Yeah, I'm sure I did too. I was completely distracted on a regular basis. Still am, as a matter of fact. But to the point, as we wrap up the show, I know Sean's raising his hand. As we wrap up this episode of Just Your Dads, first of all, thank you so much for being here, and for everybody who caught us live on Facebook and after the fact on YouTube. Again, please subscribe, leave us comments and notes, send us an email at wearejustyourdads@gmail.com. And I always say at the end of, by the way, everybody listening on the podcast and down at WSTX Radio, hope you all enjoyed that conversation. There were words in there that I had no idea what any of them meant, but thankfully Sean acted as dictionary and encyclopedia to explain some of that stuff. But
Brian, repeat after me. Jumbi. There you go. Okay.
See, there you are. Now you're a Virgin Islander.
There it is. That's so easy. So I always say at the end of every show, empathy and love is so important. Again, to your point, Jackie, you have, you see a mom out there with a child, and we rush to judgment so much about folks without really understanding their situation. And so having empathy right now, especially now, there's so much mayhem going on right now, that having some empathy and having some, just put yourself in the shoes of somebody else. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know the situation they're dealing with. So be empathetic before you're judgmental. Ask questions before making statements. And the last thing I would say is, if you can look through the world, look at the world through the lenses of love. As you said, you can be angry with somebody, but look through the lenses of love, and the world's just a much brighter place. And with that, I'll throw it to Sean to thank you and sign us out for today.
Well, again, I'm just thankful for the opportunity and the platform that we have. I want to thank Jackie again for her time. We created this platform to be able to shine a light on people that are serving the community and to uplift folks. So I want you to make sure you go out and support her book. And if you're sitting at home with an aspiration of your own, maybe your book is literal, maybe it's figurative, whatever it is that you want to create, it's inside you for a reason. Go out and do it. And I want to thank the women in my life without whom I would not be. That is my mom, Jan, and my amazing wife, Laura. And again, remember that we should be more childlike, less childish. Ask more questions, make less statements, because questions are more powerful than statements. And everybody needs the same thing. We all want to be seen. We want to be loved. We want to be heard. We want to be, make a difference. And we'd like people to know that we were here. So wherever you are, if you're watching, if you're listening, thank you, and we love you.
I love you.